This is Dante Williams, and you're watching Dante's Boxing Nation. Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? You know, when it comes to Oscar De La Hoya, he may not be perfect, right? But when it comes to the sport of boxing and the fans, I think Oscar De La Hoya is definitely on the right track. A couple of weeks ago, the news broke out that Richard Schaefer was leaving Golden Boy. And along with Richard Schaefer was Al Haymon and Floyd Mayweather. Now, some of the biggest questions were, how is Golden Boy going to survive and stay afloat when Richard Schaefer was basically the man that built Golden Boy from the ground up? And for the most part, he was the guy running the whole show. Another question I personally had was, how are these Al Haymon and Golden Boy fighters going to be split up? Because some of these fighters are specifically signed with Al Haymon, and then you have the other one signed with Golden Boy. It's like a big mess right now. So that's always been my biggest question. How will these fighters be separated and divided? Will they still be fighting against each other? You know, there's a lot of questions to be asked, but Oscar De La Hoya, he kind of answers some of those questions, or at least he talked about the subject today. Oscar De La Hoya, for starters, he was asked a complicated question about Robert Guerrero's situation, because Robert Guerrero is actually signed with Al Haymon. They asked Oscar De La Hoya if he was still signed with Golden Boy. Now, Oscar refused to answer that question, which suggests to me that there are a lot of fighters that was fighting under the Golden Boy banner, but was actually signed exclusively with Al Haymon. So even though Oscar didn't answer that question, he did speak on the Gary Russell situation, who, by the way, fights this weekend against Vasyl Lomachenko. Now, Oscar would say, it's wonderful to hear from a fighter like Gary Russell that he wants to engage in these big major fights, regardless of promoters. And that's what it's really all about. It's not about the promoters and egos. It's about the fighters and the fans. So I'm optimistic that in the near future, the fight fans will get what they deserve. Golden Boy just wants to make the biggest and the best fights. If it means making the most money and making the best fights happen that the fight fans want to watch, giving them the best fights we have to offer. Obviously, we know that Robert the Ghost Guerrero is one of the few elite fighters that boxing has today. So whether Golden Boy has an opponent or another promoter has an opponent where we can make the biggest fight happen, that's what must happen for the fans. End quote. See, that's what I like to hear, guys. It should be about the fans. And some people may say it, but I truly believe that Oscar is sincere. We already see that he's working with Bob Arum. Okay, I commend Oscar De La Hoya for branching out, reaching out, I should say, and working with somewhat of a rival or an enemy like Bob Arum. I don't really give Bob all the credit. I give Oscar most of the credit. Now, I understand where Richard Schaefer was coming from. I understand he couldn't stand Top Rank. He couldn't stand Bob Arum. But it also had a lot to do with the fact that Richard Schaefer was starting to do the same thing that Bob was doing, which is he didn't want to split the money. He wanted to get all of that in-house money, because then you don't have to split the money with another promoter. You know, obviously the math makes sense. You have two fighters that you're promoting. You don't have to split part of the money with another promoter, right? And then you don't have to negotiate, going through all the heavy negotiations of who should get the bigger piece of the pie and so on and so forth. I mean, it could be a serious headache. But Oscar De La Hoya, he's willing to go through that just for the fans. He's willing to put on the type of fights that the fans want to see. I mean, it was only a month ago that we couldn't even talk about Golden Boy fighters fighting against Top Rank fighters, because people have got so content to basically saying, oh yeah, they can't fight because this guy is with Top Rank and that guy is with Golden Boy. I mean, it sounds ridiculous to have this type of separation in the sport. We can't find out who's the best in all of these divisions if everyone is divided. But once again, Oscar De La Hoya, he is definitely on the right track. We're going to get to see the type of fights that we never thought we were going to get to see. The only bad part about this is, once again, I really don't know how many of these fighters are signed with Al Haymon as opposed to Golden Boy. And does that necessarily mean automatically that Richard Schaefer is not going to work with Oscar? I mean, for all we know, who knows? Maybe Richard will work with Oscar. Maybe Richard feels, you know what, I'll work with anybody except for Bob Arum and Top Rank. So, you know, hopefully that's the case. Hopefully they work this out because, of course, Richard Schaefer, he's still on the payroll when it comes to Golden Boy. So it only makes sense that they keep working with each other regardless if they're in the same stable or not. I mean, we don't need another Eazy-E and Dr. Dre situation, right? If you guys remember that situation, when Dr. Dre left Eazy-E, here Dr. Dre is, he making albums dissing Eazy-E, but guess what? He's still under contract with Eazy-E. So you dissing Eazy-E and you're paying him for all the songs that you're doing about him, right? That would be the situation if Oscar De La Hoya, weren't to work with Richard Schaefer. I mean, you're still paying the dude. You might as well work with him. So yeah, man, in this interview that Oscar De La Hoya did, it just sounded real positive for the sport of boxing. It sounded real positive for all the boxing fans that really want to see the best matchups. It sounds like Oscar De La Hoya is truly trying to make those type of fights that we thought we would never get to see. That's pretty much all I got, guys. I'm on to the next one.